I'm going to be telling you a true scary childhood story about the people that lived inside of my walls. No, they were not real people. They were obviously ghosts. But as a child, it was pretty scary. We moved into a new house when I was 6 years old. It was an old house. A lot of things needed to be updated on it. It was also out in the middle of nowhere. There were 2 basement rooms and I was put in one of them. The first night that we lived there, I heard scratching coming from the wall. I told my dad the next day and he assured me it was just rats and that we needed to get it fixed. He had an exterminator come out the very next day. But the exterminator didn't find anything. The exterminator set up some rat traps just in case. The scratching didn't stop though. It was loud. It almost sounded like something was trying to get out of the wall from the other side. One night I was woken up and it sounded like someone was pacing back and forth coming from the inside of my wall. I was so scared, but no one believed me. My dad kept telling me it's just rats. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of my true scary childhood story about the people that lived inside of my walls. No, they were not real people. They were obviously ghosts. I would constantly hear tapping coming from the other side of my wall. I would be woken up in the middle of the night to people pacing back and forth from inside of my wall. But my dad just kept telling me it's just rats. I was woken up at 3 a.m. one night to tapping coming from the inside of my wall. That night, I decided to be brave and tap back. I tapped 3 times. And you better believe 3 taps came right back at me. I was so scared. I didn't believe it, so I tapped 4 times. And guess what? 4 taps came right back at me. I ran upstairs screaming, mortified about what just happened. But once again, my parents didn't believe me. I probably shouldn't have communicated with the spirits because after that, things started to get really bad really quick. I'm out of time, but stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the people who lived inside of my walls. No, they were not real people. They were obviously ghosts. But as I was saying before, I tried to communicate with the spirits by tapping on the wall. And every single time I would tap, they would tap right back. After I started communicating with them, things started to get bad really quickly. I would wake up in the middle of the night and all my blankets would be all the way across the room. There were engraved scratch marks on my door, and they just kept appearing every single day. I woke up in the middle of the night one time to someone literally standing over me. I screamed so loud and the thing just disappeared. My parents finally believed me when one morning I woke up to 3 long scratch marks going down my back. They moved me upstairs into a new room and turned my old room into a guest bedroom. Whenever we have guests over though, they all tell us that they hear the tapping. And I know exactly what they're talking about.
When I was in 6th grade, I went to go visit my little cousins at their house. Their house was right on the edge of these woods. And the woods were really thick, and our parents always told us not to go there. And one time I asked my mom why, and she said because when people do bad things, they sometimes go and hide in the woods. I was staying at my cousin's house for a week on this one trip. And whenever I was bored, I would go look out the window and watch the woods. Usually it was pretty boring, and I would just be staring at trees. But one day it was like 5 p.m. and the sun was setting, so it was getting dark, and I saw something moving in the woods. I told my uncle, and he said it was probably just an animal. And I told him no, it was tall and looked like a skinny lady. And he said I have a creative imagination and it was probably just a deer. But then a few minutes later, I heard my aunt and uncle whispering in the kitchen. My aunt was talking about a woman from a psychiatric hospital in their town who had escaped. Their house was like 15 minutes away from a maximum security psychiatric hospital for criminals with mental illness. And then they saw me listening to them in the doorway and they stopped talking completely. A few days later, in the middle of the night, I heard a noise. So I woke up in the middle of the night from this noise coming from downstairs. It sounded like something was scratching the back door. But when I got downstairs, the noise had stopped. But when I looked at the window facing the woods, there were footprints in the snow. But my aunt and uncle were really strict, and they had this rule that we weren't allowed to go in their room when they were sleeping. So I made sure all the doors were locked, and I decided I would tell them in the morning. The next morning we woke up and it was a really intense blizzard. Such heavy snowfall that we couldn't see the ground. So when I told my aunt and uncle about the footprints, they didn't believe me and told me it was probably a nightmare. The next day I had to leave, and I didn't go back and visit my cousins for a long time. But the next summer, my cousins really wanted me to come for their birthday party. Before visiting them, I looked up whether they had ever found the woman who had escaped from the hospital. And Google said that authorities were still looking for her and it was a high priority case. When I got to their house, I was playing with my cousins. They were about to turn 6 years old. And one of them goes, "Let's go check if she's there." And my cousin runs to the window facing the woods. So I asked my other cousin who she was talking about. And she goes, "Oh, don't worry, that's just her imaginary friend." But I knew that did not sound right.
On Friday the 13th, my friends and I decided to plan a sleepover. So we decided to have it at my friend Marissa's house. So we were at her house and we had some dinner. It was really good. We actually had some masticholi. We were just sitting at the table talking, and one of my other friends, we'll call her Haley, she was like, oh my gosh, we should go play the Ouija board now, because they knew that I brought it. So I was like, okay, let's go. Let's go in the basement. It'll be like fun. So we're playing, and I start getting really freaked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get possessed, like, oh my gosh. Because I was so scared that, like, because we talked to this really mean ghost. I thought we were, but it was really spelling something else out. Tears are, like, streaming down my face, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, so I kept saying, like, I could see it. It was, like, in the mirror. It was really scary. So then I was like, we need to talk to it again to see what it wants. We talked to this ghost named Dan, and his wife's name is Gina. And he kept saying 40 cuts in the bathtub, and then like 790. We looked it up. It means love and like comfort. So we were like, do you want us to love you? And he said he has a daughter. And eventually we got this story that he had a daughter, and she was like kidnapped, and then she like killed herself, I guess. She died, and it was really, really sad. So we felt bad, and I kept wanting us to dig him up. And he said he was under the house, he was under the floor. So, like, I was getting really scared, and, like, he said the ghost girl's name was Erin, and she was 12, and she was turning 13 the next day. So we were like, do you want us to sing happy birthday? And he said yes, and we said at midnight, and he said no, and I said what time? And he said 6. So I was like, oh gosh, we wake up 6 in the morning. So then like everyone started getting creeped out. So we had to like stop because not everyone was like comfortable with it. So we stopped playing. And I put it away, and I was terrified. I was like, I'm not comfortable with some of the things he said. I was just like really upset. So I called my sister, and I was like, dude, this is what happened. And I told her the story, and I was like, I am so scared. I was crying. Like, it was bad. I was crying really hard, and I was like, I don't want to get possessed. So she's like, oh, it'll be okay. Just be glad that you said goodbye. I mean, you're still stupid. And I was like, okay. So I hung up on her because I was mad. And I just got so scared, and my anxiety got really bad that I was like, I can't sleep over. So I texted my mom, and my mom is like, okay, I'll come and get you. And my mom, she took me home, and she's like, leave that board in the garage. It is not coming in the house. So I was like, okay. When I woke up at 7, and I did sing happy birthday to Erin because I promised Dan that I'd sing at 6. So I sang happy birthday, and